For the digestive system, we have the GI tract, which is called the gastrointestinal tract or digestive tract, which goes all the way through from mouth to anus. We'll go over those structures on the torso model. But I'm also going to point out the accessory digestive organs, which are 5 organs that feed something into the GI tract to help digest and absorb food. So let's do the GI tract first. On the torso model, of course, we have the oral cavity, the mouth. I'll get details later. Oral cavity goes about halfway back the head, just like the nasal cavity did. And then where it starts to go straight down vertically, that's the pharynx. I'm not going to be able to see the pharynx on the torso model. That comes on down until, remember, the larynx and esophagus split off. So there's your larynx. Esophagus will split off behind that, and we can see it coming on down behind the heart. Here. There's the esophagus. Probably go up to here where it splits. So now we have the muscular esophagus. And then we're going to go through the diaphragm into the stomach. I'm going to go ahead and take this liver off so we can just follow the GI tract. There's the esophagus coming through the diaphragm. And here, entering the stomach. The stomach is J-shaped. And from the stomach, it's going to lead to the small intestine. Now, the small intestine is really going to start right here at the end of the stomach. And it's going to come on down and curl all down in here, very long and twisting. It's a small intestine because it's smaller in diameter than the gray large intestine. Now, once the food goes into the stomach, we're going to do a lot of digestion and absorption in the small intestine, and then of course we're going to have a lot of waste products. And notice the large intestine is going to go up, across, and down, and then eventually it's going to lead to the rectum and then the anus, the exterior hole. Now, large intestine, as I said, is wider, and it's also, I want to point out, the large intestine is often called the colon. That's the GI tract. Now let's look at some of the accessory organs that feed something into the GI tract. First of all, up here, we have the salivary glands. So on this side, we have a salivary gland in front of the ear. See the brownish structure? That's the parotid salivary gland. Here we have the submandibular salivary gland and the sublingual salivary gland. Remember, lingual means the tongue. Submandibular, sublingual. They feed saliva into the GI tract. You'll find out why in the physiology lecture. And then the next accessory organ is going to be the liver. The liver is going to feed bile into the small intestine, into the GI tract. And also the gallbladder here under the liver, green, is also going to feed bile into the GI tract. Let's take that off. The next accessory organ, the third one, is going to be the pancreas. Now I'm going to have to take the stomach off to see the pancreas. Remember the pancreas? It was also an endocrine organ, but it's also a digestive organ. Remember, a fish-like structure right in the middle of the torso. And that's going to feed many, many enzymes into the small intestine. Enzymes to digest every food type. So we see the pancreas as essential as a digestive organ and an endocrine hormonal organ. Take off part of that large intestine there. Well, not yet. So we got the pancreas. And now we need another accessory organ. We have had salivary glands, liver, gallbladder, pancreas. Now we need to find the appendix. The appendix is on the lower right. So I am going to have to take this part of the large intestine off. Take the small intestines off. There it is. It's like a finger sticking off the inferior part of the right colon, right large intestine, sticking in that way. That's going to secrete good bacteria and white blood cells into the colon to help kill any invaders. So that's it for that. Now let's go to the other GI tract model and go over it all again with some details. This is a nice model here. Shows the whole system all in one. So up here, I'll get details in a minute. Oral cavity turns vertical. We got the pharynx. Now here's the split. Pharynx ends here at the split. We either go, pharynx either changes into the larynx, anteriorly or posteriorly, the esophagus. Look how long that esophagus is, very muscular. Coming all through the thorax or chest. Now we go through the diaphragm about right here, and we enter in the J-shaped stomach. Then here's where we enter into the small intestine. This little part of the small intestine, the C-shaped part, is going to be called the duodenum or duodenum. Then we're going to come down, comes behind here, and continues as the jejunum part of the small intestine and the ileum part of the small intestine here. And eventually that small intestine is going to lead to the large intestine or colon. And we're going to have an ascending colon going up, a transverse colon coming across, a descending colon coming down. It's going to make an S turn, which is going to be the sigmoid colon you can't quite see there. And then once it becomes straight, that's the rectum. And then the hole would be the anus. Now let's look at some details here, okay? Now, as far as the accessory organs first, I don't see any salivary glands up there. They don't show them. But I do see the liver here and gallbladder. And they have special tubes to secrete bile into the small intestine. I do see the nice pancreas here, a nice little happy white duct to secrete enzymes. And then I see the appendix here, ready to secrete good bacteria and white blood cells into the colon. As far as details, well, we have the lips called labia, and we have the entrance to the oral cavity. Now, once we get in the oral cavity, of course, we're going to see teeth. We'll go over the different types. And we're going to see a tongue, very muscular. We're going to see a hard palate, the roof of the mouth with bone under it. We're going to see a soft palate with no bone, and hanging off the soft palate is the uvula. We have some tonsils here. It's the palatine tonsil, lingual tonsil. We already talked about the pharyngeal tonsil or adenoids up here. We have the pharynx here. This is the oropharynx part between the uvula and epiglottis. Then we have the pharynx continuing here. And then it's going to split. Esophagus is back here. Now in the stomach, you're going to see that we have rugae in the stomach. They're going to help expand the stomach. They're going to help crush food. The stomach's going to be very muscular. We have actually 4 parts of the stomach. We have the cardiac region here. And the reason for that is where the esophagus enters the stomach. There's a little sphincter there. And your heart is right here. So that's why it's called the cardiac sphincter. This little hump, where it humps up above where the esophagus enters, that's the fundus. We're going to see that in a couple other structures later. Then here, the big vertical part is the body of the stomach. And where it turns horizontal, we have the pyloric region there. At each end of the stomach, we have these sphincter muscles, which you can see can close and regulate the flow of the food. So this one is the cardiac sphincter, and this one is the pyloric sphincter. We also had a sphincter up here where the esophagus starts. Remember I said the esophagus is mostly closed unless you eat? That's going to be called the upper esophageal sphincter. This cardiac sphincter is also called the lower esophageal sphincter. And then we have the pyloric sphincter I just said. Now the pyloric region of the stomach enters into the beginning of the small intestine, and this C-shaped curve here, I'll take this off for a minute. The C-shaped curve after the stomach, that's the small intestine, and that's the special name, the duodenum. It's about 10 inches to a foot long. Duodenum, you can say it either way. That's going to be a major, crucial area of digestion. So we don't want food to come in there too fast, because this is where all the enzymes from the pancreas and the bile from the liver are going to be dumped to help digest food. Break it down. Duodenum, C-shaped part at the beginning, about 12 inches long, that hugs the pancreas. Now what else we can see here is the liver and the gallbladder, and these are the bile ducts coming down here. This white is the pancreatic ducts feeding enzymes. But to continue the small intestine, the duodenum, you can see here, it's going to lead into all these other winding tubes. So we have lots of surface area here. The upper half of this part, after the duodenum, the upper half, there's not an exact line to distinguish that, but that's called the jejunum up here. Down here, the ileum. Now that ileum is not the same as the ileum of the hip bone, of course. And this ileum has the E, I-L-E-U-M, as opposed to the ileum of the hip bone, which is I-L-I-U-M. Now inside the small intestine, we're going to see ridges as well for expansion and helping to crush and digest some food. This part of the small intestine, the jejunum and ileum, is mainly to absorb food. Now, we've done a lot of digestion in the duodenum, most of it, due to the pancreatic enzymes and bile. So the rest of this is absorbing the nutrients. They've been broken down small enough. Now we need to get them into the blood. I put the large intestine back on here if I can. Now, we're going to have some waste products left, and we're going to have plenty of water left. So here, as this ileum part of the small intestine enters the large intestine, we have another sphincter. Now, it's going to be called the ileocecal sphincter. The reason it's called the ileo part is this is the ileum, but the cecal is named after this pouch down here. The very beginning of the large intestine has a pouch on it that hangs down, and that's called the cecum. And the sphincter enters right at the cecum, so it's the ileocecal sphincter. Now, coming off the cecum, remember, is the appendix here. So then, from here, not only is the colon going to be to get the waste products out, but it's also going to absorb as much water as we can back into the body, because we want to keep water. So this large intestine is going to squeeze and wring out the feces to squeeze the water out so we can absorb it. So we have the ascending colon, transverse colon, and descending colon. Then we have the sigmoid colon with the S turn, which I'll show you later, rectum and anus. Now, the colon, as it turns here, it's by the liver. So sometimes they call that the hepatic flexure, where it turns. Hepatic is liver. And on this side, this turns, the spleen would be right here. This would be called the splenic flexure here. What else you can see on this large intestine are these pouches all along it. They're called alstra pouches. And what happens is this long muscle here that puts tension on these pouches is called the teniae coli. Teniae for tension, and coli since it's the large intestine. So picture that contracting and squeezing these pouches together like an accordion and squeezing the water out to be absorbed. So Tenei coli goes all along the colon, and then each of these little pouches is the alstra there. This first little hanging pouch we call the cecum. Let's see if we can see anything else in here. Here's some nerves coming down to the various sphincter muscles. Now we're going to have two sphincter muscles also in the rectum, actually in the anus area. So this one, called the internal anal sphincter, expands when your rectum gets full and sends messages up these nerves to your brain saying your rectum's getting full soon. So you might think about getting close to a place where you can go to the bathroom, defecate. And then these nerves lead to this muscle down here, which is the external anal sphincter, which you control voluntarily to open when you're ready. Internal anal sphincter you can't control. It gives you the urge. External anal sphincter you control. It's voluntary. Let's go back up to the liver real quick. For the liver and the gallbladder. So we're going to have to learn the names of these ducts here. The liver basically makes the bile that's going to help digest fats. So this green duct is the hepatic duct, and the liver is going to make so much bile that it's going to store it in the gallbladder. So the gallbladder doesn't make it, it stores it. So we always have a supply because we eat lots of fats. So this little duct leading from the gallbladder here is the cystic duct. This duct leading from the liver is the hepatic duct. And where they join at number 50 is the common bile duct, because they both carry bile and they join there. So that's the common bile duct. And it's going to come on down, and actually you can see it here again, emptying into the duodenum here. Remember the duodenum, C-shaped around the pancreas. In the meantime, the pancreas is secreting enzymes to digest carbs, fats, proteins through the pancreatic duct, also into the duodenum. Now, we have this protrusion of the bile duct and the pancreatic duct into the duodenum, and that's called the duodenal papilla. Papilla, remember, protrusion. Pancreas does have some parts. This is actually the head of the pancreas here, tucked into the duodenum. The tail is going to come back here and touch the spleen. The middle part's the body. On the liver, we have a big right lobe and a smaller left lobe. We actually have some lobes under here. That's a square quadrate lobe. This white ligament is a falciform ligament. And this lobe here, looks like 46, is the caudate lobe because it looks like a tail. The liver also has that dipped in region called the hilus, where vessels come in and out, including the bile ducts, hepatic artery. There's that purple hepatic portal vein, remember, that brings in all the nutrients to the liver to be detoxified, stored, and metabolized. We learned that in the blood vessel section. All right, let's look at a head model now. Sagittal cut. See if we missed anything there. Okay. Well, let's look and see what we got here. Maybe a couple other terms we need to go over. Lips or labia, teeth. Now, there is an area between the lips and the teeth, and also between your cheek and your teeth. If you stick your finger in your mouth, between your cheeks and your teeth, there's this little dipped area there. That's called the vestibule, a little hallway area, entry area. Here's the tongue, As I said, very muscular. Hard palate, soft palate, uvula. Tongue with the lingual tonsil. Here's a palatine tonsil hanging off the palate. And then we got the pharynx. So where the pharynx splits, larynx here, esophagus here. If you just want to review the parts of the pharynx, nasopharynx from the top of the nasal cavity to the bottom of the uvula, oropharynx from uvula to epiglottis, from epiglottis to the split, laryngopharynx. This was oropharynx, laryngopharynx, but it's all the pharynx. When food comes in, remember, the swallowing reflex, we called it. Food hits the back of the pharynx here, and it causes a reflex that pushes the uvula up so food doesn't go up the nasal cavity. It pushes the epiglottis down so food doesn't go into the larynx, and it opens the upper esophageal sphincter so food can go down. Now we have the stomach. Remember, it's J-shaped. And from here, we can see the esophagus coming here. We have the a lot of muscle layers here. Matter of fact, we have 3 muscle layers. Most of the intestine has 2, circular, longitudinal. The stomach has 3 because we're really squeezing the food here and mixing it up. So I remember the layers of the muscle in the stomach. OCL, Ocean City Lives. Ocean City was a beach I went to in Maryland. So the deepest is the oblique because the muscle fibers of the stomach go at an angle. Then circular, they come around the stomach, and then longitudinal go up and down the stomach lengthwise. So working from the inside out, OCL, Ocean City Lives, oblique, circular, longitudinal. We see the cardiac region where the esophagus enters the fundus, above the esophagus body, in the pyloric region. At the end of the pyloric region, there's going to be a sphincter where we start the duodenum. I'll take that off, and you can see those regions now. Top, you see the esophagus coming in the cardiac region. The hump above the esophagus fundus, vertical part body, horizontal part pyloric region. You can see a sphincter at the left of the pyloric region there, the pyloric sphincter. We're getting ready to enter the duodenum. You can see rugae in there. Lots of rugae ridges. Now let's just go over these accessory organs again real quick. There's a model of the 3 salivary glands, parotid in front of the ear, submandibular under the mandible, and sublingual under the tongue. Here's a head model of that. I have to flip it over here to see the parotid. Here, you can see the submandibular here, and then here's the sublingual under the tongue. This is a nice model here showing the relationship between the pancreas and the duodenum. So here's your fish-like pancreas with the head, body, tail. Head tucked into the duodenum, tail touching the spleen on the left. Nice C-shaped duodenum here, with the ridges inside of it. Here's the pancreatic duct here. We can see this green bile duct coming down from the liver, because remember that also is going to enter the duodenum. This is the duodenal papilla. Protrusion where the pancreatic duct and bile duct enter the duodenum. Now this is going to get to the rest of the small intestine, and I want to point out a couple things here. Jejunum ileum. Here we can see the ileocecal sphincter. This fatty covering over all the intestines, they cut it off here. That's called the omentum. It means the apron, fatty apron. On the large intestine, besides the cecum, we see the ascending colon, transverse colon, and the descending colon. I told you I would show you the sigmoid colon, so you can see on the back, the descending colon comes out and kind of makes the S turn. That's the sigmoid. When it comes straight out, that's the rectum. This membrane in the back here, that's going to be the peritoneum. And that's a fluid-filled sac around the abdominal organs, just like we had the pleura in the respiratory system around the lungs and the pericardium, fluid-filled sac around the heart. We have a peritoneum sac around the abdominal organs. From the back, I see the duodenum there, C-shaped around the pancreas. So from the front, we can also see the aostra of the colon and the tenei coli. I've already mentioned the cecum, ileocecal sphincter, and I mentioned the appendix. Don't forget the appendix. There. Here's another one where we could just barely see. Just wanted to point out on this one that you can see the sigmoid. Ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon. We flip it over. There, it's nice on this one. Descending colon coming down. The S turn, sigmoid colon. S for sigmoid. Straight out rectum. Here's the peritoneum here. And lastly, we have the liver. And on this liver, sits like that. Right lobe, left lobe. You see the vena cava going through it. You see the green gallbladder there. Now let's look at these ducts and the other lobes. Quadrate lobe, because it's square. Caudate lobe here, beside the vena cava. And we have the cystic duct coming off the gallbladder. We have the hepatic ducts coming off the liver. And where they join, since they both carry bile, would be the common bile duct. Hepatic artery, hepatic portal vein, falciform ligament. I'm going to remind you that coming off the top of the liver is the hepatic vein, not the hepatic portal. Hepatic portal is under the liver. Purple. And then this liver model, I can't really take it off of the stand. Well, I might be able to. Okay, so we'll be in the body like that. Right lobe, left lobe, falciform ligament, gallbladder. On top, vena cava, hepatic vein. Let's flip it so we can see underneath. Gallbladder with cystic duct here. All these green ducts coming from the liver are hepatic ducts. Here's one. Where it joins the cystic duct, common bile duct, that'll come on down to the duodenum. We have this purple hepatic portal vein. So that's pretty much it. Here's the another lobe here. That's the quadrate lobe. We can't really see the caudate too well. It's beside the vena cava, tail beside the vena cava. I'm going to do the teeth separately on another video because I'm really going to get into that, you know, being the dentist.